Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the needs of society. Too much and too often do we hear of the needs of the individual. Everyone should by now be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs for the individual. I have put together the hierarchy of needs for society. What do we need to have a society that functions and can be maintained over long periods of time? This also relates greatly to the question, how did our societies become so great over such a long period of time, and how did they maintain themselves and become what we know of them today? And of course also, how do we improve our societies and get our nations back on track to becoming what they once were? To do that, let's look at this model that I've made here. And if you're not familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, let me go over it briefly. It's very similar to what you're looking at on the screen now. At the bottom of the pyramid are the things that are most important to the function of whatever it is you're talking about, in this case society. And it goes up from there, and they build off of one another as you go up. And as you go up the pyramid, the item becomes less and less important to maintaining whatever it is you're talking about. So in Maslow's hierarchy of needs for the individual, it starts off at the bottom. You have physiological needs, eat, sleep, drink, that kind of thing. That goes up to safety, love and belonging, esteem, and then eventually at the very top, self-actualization. So if you take care of each step as you go along, at the end of the pyramid, you will reach the peak of what you can become as a person. So in my model here, it's essentially the same thing, but as applied to society as a whole. When we look at a collective group of people, which is what we know as a society. This can also be applied to the nation in sort of broad terms, but I like to use society. And in particular for my model, there are two distinct categories for each of these, just to kind of clarify a little bit more. And the first three blocks of the pyramid are the survive. These are the three essential things that you need for your society to survive. And the top two parts of the pyramid are simply parts of the thrive. We all know the phrase survive and thrive. And it's my belief that the bare minimum that you need to maintain or create a society are the portions of the survive, and that the thrive will come naturally after you have secured the first three. So let's start at the bottom. This is the family. And the family is the smallest collective force in society. And it's also the building block of society. Without a family structure, you cannot hope to create or maintain a society. Primarily because you need an environment in which you can raise the next generation of people that will make up the society. So you need to create a foundation for the creation of children. But also what some people seem to overlook is that the male-female family dynamic is a key part of self-actualization, or in this case, society's self-actualization. And what I mean by that is men and women have different roles to play within society, and they have different needs. For a man to be at his peak, to be at his most productive, he needs to have a family that he can rely on. He needs a wife that is going to help maintain his home and raise his children. With that worry off of his back, he is able to go out in the world and conquer nature. And in return, the woman does not have to worry about the acquisition of resources and the security of her children. And of course, the way that the Western world has developed a family structure is what we generally refer to as the nuclear family, with one woman and one man, and this creates children. And it also creates, more importantly, a stable environment in which children can be raised. We should know by now that when you have a split household, there is a higher probability that children will become criminals or have some type of emotional or mental issue. There are some cases as well when childhood development is stunted because there are issues within a split-parent home. And you cannot possibly have a society of healthy, functioning adults if there is not a stable home for them to come home to when they are children in their developmental years. So the family is the core building block of the rest of society. It is the number one indicator of how strong your society is going to be. And if we look in the Western world today, relationships between the genders are not always so good. And this reflects on how poorly our society is doing as a whole. Essentially, without some type of family structure, your society will degrade, fall out, and come into non-existence. As we go up the pyramid one more time, we get to social norms. And this is an interesting thing. To have a stable functioning society, you need a degree of uniformity. So once you have established the family structure that you're going to have, now within the larger aspects of society, you need to have some kind of uniformity. And what I mean by this is that to reduce the amount of potential conflict between persons and groups, you need to have, I don't want to say universal, but you need to have a similar or familiar way of interacting with one another. So behavior, very important. Language, and even perhaps ethnicity or identity needs to be uniform, because this reduces the amount of conflict that is going to happen within your society. For example, if I go to greet somebody and I outstretch my hand to shake their hand, and suddenly they flip me off, well, obviously there's going to be miscommunication there. If that person thinks that flipping me off means hello or is a greeting, but I perceive it as something different, there's going to be miscommunication. There will be conflict of some kind. It also becomes extremely difficult to communicate with people if there is not a semi-uniform language of some kind. Language barriers are one of the primary factors that separates humans and high society from animals. The ability to communicate very complex thoughts with one another. It's not just screeching back and forth. We have a very complex language structure, and this has allowed us to form complex societies. Of course, you cannot have a society where it's perfectly okay to go around stealing and raping one another. This type of behavior should be discouraged. It needs to be uniform in the society. It needs to be good for the survival of the society as a whole. But of course, if we understand the pyramid model, there has to be an underlying family structure first, or in which we can cultivate social norms, because establishing these social norms starts in the family, in the home. To teach children these things like language and behavior, it must come from the parents first. It cannot come from the state in and of itself, perhaps incentivized or reinforced, but the teaching of social norms, behavior, language, etc. must be taught in the home. So we see the building blocks of this pyramid model. The next most important need of society is security. What I mean by this is the promotion of strength as a virtue and the enforcement of borders and separation between groups. You must protect your interests before you are able to thrive in an environment. When our ancestors went out to farm land, they simply did not just go into a forest and start farming. No, they must set up these rigid borders in order to protect their crop, protect their land, protect their resources from outsiders who wish to seek them harm. You must also protect your society from external threats. We would not get up and go to work every day if there was a fear of being blown up by a tank or missile of some kind. We first worry about our own survival and then productivity afterwards. So you must secure your society. You must be strong. You must erect walls in order to keep subversives and undesirables out of your society that would seek to tear you down from within. This section of the needs also goes over the ideas and theory behind governance and the state. You must have a state that works with society and protects the interests of society, not necessarily run by the society in the more democratic individualist sense, but it must look out for the health and safety of the nation or of the society, of the people, however you want to describe it. This sort of collective power is essential in providing security for all of these things that you hold so dear. We would never have come to the point where we are today technologically if we did not protect ourselves from outsiders who would come in, steal all of our resources, and then leave. Our societies would have collapsed and we wouldn't be where we are today. Now we move into the thrive section of the pyramid. And this essentially, once you have security and uniform social norms and a family structure that is conducive to the raising of children and the development of male-woman relationships, now you begin to thrive. Now you can be productive. And productivity, I mean commerce, trade, agriculture, technology, finance, whatever you want to say. We have conquered and tamed nature, and now we can shape it however we see fit. You know, the modern free market economy that has given us so much in the Western world would not be possible if we did not have a strong emphasis on the family, uniform social norms to be able to communicate effectively with one another, and the security to back all of that up and secure those first two steps. We would not be able to engage in free trade or send men to the moon or anything like this if we did not have the building blocks, which I call survive, in this model. A good example of this would be the highly technological societies we live in. It would not be possible to develop and maintain this technology if we did not have security from external threats such as war, if we did not have a highly complex way of communicating effectively with one another, and if we did not have a family structure which allowed the next generation to be created and brought up in an effective way, essentially creating the next generation of healthy, functioning adults, none of this would be possible. And as our society thrives, we move up the pyramid to the last, and I don't want to say least important because that is a sort of negative connotation to that, but culture is the final building block of society. And culture is an in-depth knowledge of language, extremely complex understanding of language, food, religion, music, the arts, literature, and even the sciences as well as a part of culture. Again, if we did not have a strong emphasis on the family and the healthy raising of what would become functioning adults, if we did not have uniform and highly effective communication through social norms, if we did not have secure borders, if we were not productive and able to invest in commerce and productivity and have the ability to feed ourselves, we would not have arts and architecture and science and literature and all these wonderful things that are the culmination of a grand society, the ones that we strive for, that we knew of in the past, that we were supposed to improve upon, that our societies now are only degrading as time goes on. This is only a first rough draft. I'm getting my ideas out there, and I would like your input as well into this idea of what are the needs of society, and can we categorize them and order them in a way in which we can understand what is most important as a value for society? What are the building blocks of our societies? So if you have something that you would like to add, please leave a comment down below or DM me on Twitter. Find me on Discord. The social media links will be in the banner. And thanks for watching.